one of the first things people would say to me is, oh my gosh, Mormon girls are so freaky. They're like, yeah, it's the poop hole loophole.
Let's justify this because it's not technically sex.
Hi, my name is Shelise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. As always, if you're listening only and you would prefer to see our faces, head over to my YouTube channel at Cults to Consciousness. It would mean a lot if you could like, subscribe, comment, help us boost the algorithm so more people see the videos. And yeah, today's guest, I'm so pumped for this one. Guys, it's gonna get spicy. The guest that I have today, she was born and raised in the Mormon Church, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And she did the whole Mormon thing, what we were taught to do. Got married young, had 4 kids. And after 25 years, she was trying to help someone, a close friend of hers, get through some difficult times. And in doing so, she decided to do a deep dive into the doctrine, which we all know how that ends. So after uncovering these unsavory parts of the church, she realized she could no longer be a part of it. She decided to go to YouTube telling her story. The video blew up, and that was 3 years ago. So she has done viral videos on YouTube. One of her biggest videos was on soaking, which stay tuned, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. And she's also been on Mormon Stories with John DeLynn. So I'm so excited to have this awesome pioneer of ex-Mormon content creating on with me. Welcome, Exmo Lex.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. This is going to be so much fun. And I'm super pumped that I was able to connect with you because in my last episode with my fiance, I was like, man, I really want to do a collaboration with Exmo Lex. And here we are. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm glad it worked out. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So after I saw your soaking video and, you know, that whole topic has gone viral, so many publications have covered it, I just started thinking, like, there's so much to talk about when it comes to sex and high demand religions. And I think that's also one of your missions too, is to uncover the culty things about Mormonism. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do, but across cults in general. So we have very similar missions, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I love that you're doing multiple cults as well.
Thanks. It's been very interesting and very enlightening talking to all of these awesome people. So today, though, I wanted to really, really dive into the sex part because I think it's something that is overlooked, and usually because most people don't want to talk about sex because it's uncomfy.
Right.
When you are raised in a way that it's like, shh, don't talk about sex. But to the detriment of the people that aren't allowed to talk about it. And so we're going to talk about the spicy, sexy stuff and the Mormon loopholes and the things that the general public are going to be like, wait, what? and we're also going to talk about the ways in which it is harmful and why we believe it is to be so. So having said that, let's start with the restrictions and why people turn to these loopholes, these sex loopholes, in order to make themselves feel better. Let's just like give them a list, just all the things that you're not allowed to do as a Mormon.
Yeah, it's so crazy because there are like so many things that they talk about like specifically that makes it even funnier because, I mean, you've got like obviously no masturbation, no sex before marriage of any kind. So there's, you know, no oral sex, no anal sex, no touching, no hand jobs, nothing like that. They also have stuff like no heavy petting and no necking. And you know what's funny to me? And tell me if you have a similar experience. But they don't ever like talk about what that even means. They just say it and expect all of the youth to know what they're talking about. Like when I was a kid and they would be like, no heavy petting. I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? What are you talking about? Like picturing animals.
That is so true. Oh my gosh, like no heavy petting.
Yeah, no necking. I was like, I don't think I do that, but I don't really know what it is, so I'm not sure.
That is so true. I never really thought about that, but you're just kind of expected to understand what it
Right.
means. And eventually, through the context, you can put the pieces together. But I don't think I've ever heard a single authority say what that means. And I'm sure people who aren't Mormon are like, what is that?
Right?
Yeah, we're right there with you. We have no
I
idea.
don't know. We're not sure. But it's like you said, like with the context, you're kind of just like I'll just not touch anybody and like hopefully I'll be good.
I feel like as a kid, I just thought necking was like kissing each other's necks.
Yeah,
Like that was my
something like
idea. I'm like,
that.
necking, like, because that's like a very intimate, a
Right.
peck on the lips, like, okay, kissing, but when you kiss someone's neck, that's when things get a little steamy.
See, I was over here being like 10 years old and picturing people like touching their necks together.
That's
Being
so
close.
good.
Like we're giraffes or something. I don't know. It's kind of bizarre.
Also, like the petting thing. Like, and it's not just petting, it's heavy petting. And we're just like, what is heavy petting? It would make much more sense if they were just clear.
Right.
Don't touch each other. Okay, got
Right,
it.
which is basically like what they're going for, like because they do say like you should not touch the private parts of another person's body with your clothes on or off. Like, I mean, and it's funny because like you'll see Mormons like try to make a case for like, no, like we're not that heavily controlled, but it's like if you really look at it, they have detailed lists of everything that you are not supposed to do, and they go over it pretty constantly. So it's not like it's just, one general authority that said, don't do this. It's like many, many, many over generations of like, for the strength of youth and all of these different things, you have these instructions. It's very, very clear. So it's funny to me that people even try to argue about it sometimes.
Yeah, and the fact that, who was it? Who wrote The Miracle of Forgiveness?
Spencer W. Kimball. Oh, God.
Oh, Kimball. Freaking Kimball, trying to say that masturbating can make you gay.
Yeah. It made me wonder about him, to be honest with you.
Yeah, everyone says
this guy had an obsession. He had an obsession with sex. Like, more than almost any other general authority, this guy talked about sex on a loop all the time. It made me think that that's what's on his mind. It must be. How could it not be?
Right. Well, and that's why we're here, because we're talking about how sexual repression can lead to all of these awful things, even if it's just like forcing your opinions onto a group of people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he literally said that homosexuality is one step away from bestiality.
Yeah.
Guys, come on.
And he's dead serious.
That's why everyone's like, were you gay?
Right. Well, and like you said, him teaching that masturbating will make you gay. And isn't he the one that also had like specific like way to keep yourself from touching yourself? It was one of the general authorities was like literally like tie your hands or like when you're in bed asleep so that you don't accidentally start touching yourself. Like it's wild.
Yes. Guys, this is some kinky stuff here. Yeah, I remember that. It was, I think he was the one that gave the little factory talk to the men.
Yeah.
Or the boys, let's clarify, to the boys, saying that your penis is like a little factory, and once you get that factory going, aka masturbating, it's gonna want to keep producing, and you're just gonna want to masturbate more and more and more until you can't do anything but masturbate, and like, don't turn on that little factory. And so you have these boys that are terrified of touching themselves. Like, what if I'm cleaning it and it goes off? Like, and then they feel guilty about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really sad. And I feel like, it's a cause for such shame that it is really, really harmful for people. Like, you hear about things like soaking and stuff, and it's like, well, with the context of what people grow up hearing, all of these things that you absolutely cannot do, because remember, and you like breaking the law of chastity, that's the sin next to murder. They have taught that.
Right. I'm so glad you brought that up.
So like, of course, like, but you're a hormonal young person. so you're going to basically, you are going to mess up and hate yourself. Like, that's what's going to happen.
Yes, that's the formula. And that's exactly, you don't stand a chance. My goodness, Lex, I was so horny as a kid, I cannot tell you. Like, my sex drive was so high, and I prided myself on not letting anyone touch me. And it only happened when I was a senior in high school because I was removed from the Mormon bubble into Portland, and I had a boyfriend who was super sexually active, and he basically just convinced me. And I was so horny, I was like, you know what? Screw it. Yeah, let's do like, we didn't even have sex, but I was still like, oh my gosh, like I need something. Like, what? Like, I think I found out what masturbation was because it accidentally happened through friction, and I literally blacked out. It was such a good orgasm.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
And I remember being like, what is that? Like, I had no idea. I didn't know anything about sex. I just knew that I had all these feelings that I couldn't express. And I remember, oh my gosh, tell me if you had anything like this. I remember sitting with my best friend. We were going through a Victoria's Secret magazine because my mom got them. I don't know why. But we're going through a magazine, and I was like, this is what I'm going to wear on my honeymoon, the night that I lose my virginity. Like, we were so horny. Like, we just had to focus all of our energy into a future moment. And that's another reason why I wanted to get married young, because I was just like, I just want to do it finally, you know?
Right. You know what's interesting, like you talking about that too, is they teach in the church that not only like acting on these feelings is a sin, but thinking about it, having sexual thoughts,
Right.
that is a sin too. You can sin through your thoughts. And so, you know, if you're lustful, if you are horny, if you are thinking about these things, if you want to do them, that is just that, like, that's almost as much of a problem as if you actually were to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember having, like, sitting in a lesson, like having, you know, them talk about the law of chastity and talk about like King David and Bathsheba and stuff like this, and them like emphasizing that you can sin in your thoughts too. And me just being like, well, I guess I'm going to hell, even though I've never done anything like that, because this is a sin too.
Right. It's impossible. It's an impossible standard. So going back to the list thing, I remember my bishop, after my boyfriend and I messed up, and this was like the downfall of my Mormon background, I guess you could say, where I was like, yeah, this sucks and I'm out. But anyway, after he convinced me to give him head, I was like, oh, okay, fine, let's do it, sure. We'd been dating for a year, mind you, and I was still a virgin. And so it happens. Immediately after, he's like, we need to talk to the bishop. And I was like, really? Really?
Awesome.
Right now? Like, immediately after. And so I did. It was very traumatic. Very, like, I mean, we could do a whole episode on bishops' interviews and worthiness interviews where you have to describe in detail your sexual sins. But we won't get into that. Afterwards, after he told me, yeah, I don't think you're a good influence on him. I think that it's best if you break up. And I'm like, are you kidding me? After that, my boyfriend comes home with this list on yellow paper. I distinctly remember the color. It's like they'd just been passing him out to all of the people in the singles ward, because I was 19 at the time, living in Vegas. But it went as far as to say, don't be alone in the same room together. And I'm like, okay, we're adults. Like, we live on our own. It's not like we live at our parents' house and we can leave the door open or whatever. Right. And it was never stay with them past midnight. And it was don't even enter their the other person's bedroom. All of these things. And I was looking at him like, you can't be serious. Like, you really want to follow these? And he's like, you know what? I think in order to make it right with God, I think we should really give it a try. And I was like, okay. So my level of petty was doing all the things on the list. So I remember he's like carrying his laundry into his bedroom, and I just stop at the doorway, and he looks at me and he's like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm not entering your bedroom. And he just he gave me this look, but I was like, what do you expect? And then we go and sit down and watch a movie together, and we're sitting like straight up, and he tries to get me to kind of lean over and cuddle, and I'm like, I don't know, we can't lay down. Like, can't lay down together.
We gotta keep a Book of Mormon distance between us. Thank you.
And then the best part, this was like the height of my petty. I was keeping an eye on the time, and the second the clock struck midnight, I was like, well, I guess it's time to go. And he goes, don't you want to finish the movie? I'm like, I would really like to finish the movie, but it's midnight. I think I better, turning into a pumpkin.
Right.
Get out of here.
What they always told us was the Holy Ghost goes to bed at midnight. So if you're not in bed by midnight, you're going to sin.
Yeah. And I remember, honestly, having those fears. So I think it was after this point. During that date, I was just being really petty, like I said, and was like, fine, I'm gonna leave. But I do remember hanging out with people into like the late hours, because we did have a fun singles ward in Vegas. Like, we went on nighttime hikes to hot springs and stuff, and we did a lot of fun things together. We would go out dancing. In fact, before Imagine Dragons was famous, they were friends of ours. Like, we would go to their shows at these random casinos and like dance and stuff. So I remember hanging out till 2 a.m. and going, oh wow, like I felt exposed. Like, I was afraid that because I was already horny, we've established this. I was afraid that now that it's past midnight, there's an even bigger chance that I'm going to mess up. And it's a real thing. It's a real thing.
It really is. Wow. See, when you're talking about like not being able to go in rooms together and stuff, and that was like, in my house, that was really serious, like very much enforced. But
really,
what I wasn't expecting was, as an adult, that still being very much a thing. So my husband and I, when we were engaged, I went to visit his family at their house, and, he wasn't living there. So they had just like guest bedrooms made up. And there was like a night where I was upset about something. I don't remember what it was, but I was, like crying, and I went to the guest bedroom, and my fiance came in with me to like, talk to me and try to make me feel better. And I remember his family being like taking issue with it and like having a problem because we were in the room together.
What?
And like, keep in mind, like, we are adults. I think, let's see, I would have been 19 and he would have been 23. We had been engaged. We were going to be married in like a month and a half. And that was the problem. Like, they wanted to be there because we should not be in a room alone together.
That is crazy. I think the issue, I mean, there's so many issues with this, but one of the big things is you make these kids, teenagers, adults believe that they have no agency, or like they have no self-control, right? It's like,
Yeah.
If you cross the threshold into a room that has a bed, you won't be able to control yourself. And you start to be afraid of the dumbest things instead of realizing, oh, I have the power. I can make the decision. It's not
Right.
like, if I show my shoulders, my fiance is going to jump my bones. No.
Yeah.
Men are capable of doing or not doing something.
Right.
So I hate the whole victim blaming thing where, oh, this woman was raped. Well, what was she wearing? No, that is not her fault. He made his choices because he made his choices. End of story.
Right.
Yeah.
And
so
same goes with like where you're at. Like, we're saying, like, where was she? Like, what time was it? Like, these things are irrelevant.
Yes.
Completely. And it's the same. It's the same with what we're talking about here. If you're going to have sex, you're going to have sex. You don't need a bed. You don't need a couch. You
Right.
don't need a room. Like,
Right.
it's going to happen one way or another. And I mean, some of the first sexual experiences that I had were in the bed of a truck. So
Hey.
it's not like you don't need a mattress.
Exactly. And so that leads perfectly into, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. The slippery slope to soaking, as you put it in one of your videos. So now that we've laid the groundwork as far as what's allowed and what's not allowed, which is basically nothing is allowed, people still make allowances because they need to make it okay in their head. Like, I'm doing this and I know it's technically a sin, but maybe it's not a sin.
Or maybe it's not as bad of a sin.
Yes,
Like,
it's like a
like
step
you're not
below.
going all the way to hell,
Exactly.
Like, I can repent for this.
If sex is the sin next to murder, what is the sin next to sex? Like, can we just...
Right. Is that like oral? Is it soaking? Like what's worse, you know? I need a tier list.
Quick note, that whole interview that I mentioned with my bishop about giving my boyfriend oral, he told me that that was sex. He said oral sex is sex. And I was like, sure isn't, because I didn't get any penis action. You know what I mean? He was literally trying to punish me the same amount of time as if I had actual intercourse. I was so pissed. And that, I mean, that's what started my spiral, because he made me believe like I was lowest of the low. I wasn't even the dirt. I was the worms in the dirt. He said oral sex is unnatural. It is nowhere to be found in the Bible. And I'm like, who cares if it's in the Bible? And I was like, it's just kissing on another part of the body. And he's like, oh no, Shelise, it's much more serious than that. And I'm like, so that was my loophole that clearly didn't hold up in court, the court of my bishop.
Oh my God. Like it's not in the Bible. Okay. Well, there's tons of incest in the Bible. Does that mean it's okay? Because
gosh,
they did that all the time. Like
that is such a good point. I wish I would have thought of that. Sure wish I would have thought of that. But, you know, I was being traumatized, so what do you do?
who was it? What was that? I'm trying to remember like who it was in the story. One like Bible character, his daughters got him drunk and had sex with him to get pregnant. Who was that?
I don't remember, but I know the story because I recently I think it was recently covered on Not So Molly Mormon podcast. They did like a whole episode on it.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how disgusting it was, and I was like, that is so gross.
So gross. But it's the Bible, so it's okay, I guess.
So tell the good people what soaking is.
So soaking is a loophole to sex that, you know, it's not all the way sex. It is, but it's not. So basically, you're going to put a penis inside a vagina, but you're not going to move. You're not going to thrust. You're not going to wiggle. You just put it in and hold still.
Yes.
And that's it. It's not technically sex because you're not moving. You're not reaching climax inside the other person. So not sex. It's the type of thing that like it used to be the stuff of Mormon lore, right? Like we heard about it happening. There was like comics about it, but lo and behold, it is an actual thing that actually happens. And anyway, that's what soaking is for those who don't know, because you have somehow missed out on this viral thing.
A lot of people say, well, I'm Mormon and I've never heard of it, so it's not real. Well,
yeah.
Let's make it clear that there's a lot of things that Mormons don't know about that are real.
Yeah. First of all. And then, I mean, there's also the fact that, like, I mean, I soaked as a Mormon, right?
She
with my
soaked,
fiance.
guys.
But I didn't know there was a term.
Yeah.
We didn't, like, think that we were doing something that, like, other people did. We didn't hear about it or know that this was a thing. It was just, like, something that sort of happened organically, and we just, like, justified it in our minds. And then, like, 5-10 years later, then we're finding out, like, oh, like, there's a term for that, and it's something that has been done, and oh my God, we did that.
I have actually participated unknowingly. So it was actually how I lost my virginity. Basically, I had left the church. I was like, okay, this isn't for me. And I started dating outside, the outsiders, non-Mormons. And I was with someone who was just like the worst. But anyway, that's beside the point. He really wanted to have sex, which most men do. Most people do. Let's be honest. And it was kind of like I'm just going to put it there, but I'm not going to put it in. And I'm just thinking like, okay, yeah, it's fine. I guess that doesn't count because I'm still a virgin. And I was adamant, even though I wasn't Mormon anymore. I was like, I'm going to wait till marriage because that's what I set out to do. And I'm already almost 20 years old and I feel like that's got to count for something. And so it was a situation where I was so turned on, I didn't even realize that he put it in. Like, I honestly didn't even feel it.
Wow.
Until he pulled out and I was like, oh my gosh, like what just happened? And he goes, we just had sex. I just broke down. Crying. And I said, you promised me that you weren't going to do that. It's a product of multiple things. One, he assaulted me and he shouldn't have done that. Two, I was so bottled up as far as my sexual repression that I was just so swept up in the feelings, and my body was open, like it was ready for it. And
Right.
I didn't even realize that it had happened. But the shame and the guilt that I felt afterward, even though I wasn't Mormon, because I had just deconstructed like not even a year, it was probably months actually after I was deconstructing Mormonism, that I still felt like ashamed of myself. And that's also something I wanted to speak on as far as you make all of these allowances and you try and make it make sense and make it okay, but the shame and the guilt is still there no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry that that happened.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but also I'm really glad I didn't wait till marriage.
Right. I guess pros and cons.
I certainly had dreamed of that moment happening much differently as we've established.
Right.
And I wish it would have gone differently, but also I'm glad that it kind of woke me up to kind my sexuality and being like, "Oh wow, I can enjoy sex and it's okay. I'm not going to hell for it." And also that was when I was 19 and I'm 32 now and just about to get married. Those would have been a lot of lost years of not
It
having
would
sex.
have. It certainly would have.
Yes. Okay, so we have soaking. We have another one. We don't know if it's actually true, but there are rumors of earthquaking slash jump pumping. You want to explain?
Yeah, so this one is like soaking, except for you have a third person creating movement. So I've heard either they go like under the bed and kick the bed from underneath,
Hmm.
or like standing on the bed and like bouncing the bed to create some movement. But the people, doing the sex act aren't creating the movement, so it's not a sin. I don't know. It's another one. That one I'm not sure if that's real. It sounds fake to me, but you know, the rumors came from somewhere, I suppose.
I heard about that in another Not Somali Mormon episode where it's like a BYU thing because you have bunk beds. So it would be more plausible if you were on the top bunk and you're like, hey, just like come in. But also, who would want someone else in the room? Like, you're already doing something that's
Yeah,
super intimate, wrong, shameful, all of the things. And then to rope a third party in, like, we haven't had sex, but we've had a weird threesome.
right. That's kind of one of the reasons it makes me feel like it's not real, because I mean, just coming from like a background of being very Mormon and having like sexual experiences, you were already very like, this is bad, this is wrong, we should not be doing this, and it would have been like mortifying to have another person in on it. So
Yeah.
I don't know, but you also have to, take in consideration that like, I mean, I don't know. This could be like a whole other tangent, but I don't know how much you've seen of the Mormons on like Mormon mom talk that
I
have
haven't.
rumors of like soft swinging. You haven't seen that?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
Yeah. So like, I mean, if that's something that people do as a Mormon, who's to say that they wouldn't do earthquaking either? I don't know. Something to think about. I don't know.
It's a really good point. Another one, and I discovered this when I moved to LA. And where are you from? Mormon or Mormon? Where are you from? Utah? Are you Mormon? Yeah, they used to
Yeah.
be like that whole conversation. And one of the first things people would say to me is, "Oh my gosh, Mormon girls are so freaky." And I'm like, "Really?" And they're like, "Yeah, they're like one of the only groups of people that exclusively do anal." And I'm like, "Really?" And that's when I realized, they're like, yeah, it's the poop hole loophole.
Oh my God.
They say that they're still
Oh,
virgins because they haven't had a penis in their vagina, but they'll do anal sex no problem. Have you heard of that?
I've personally no experience with it. I don't know anybody that did that as a loophole, but it's not all that surprising, because again, it's just another thing that's like, let's justify this because it's not technically sex all the way. So, I could see it happening. That one for sure. Yeah.
And it's funny to me, and it's just now clicking that Mormonism is famous for redefining words,
That's true.
right?
Very true. Yeah.
So it's not sex because sex means a penis and a vagina and thrusting.
Yes. Yeah. That's funny. I hadn't thought about it that way, but I can definitely see that being like the chain of events in your mind, like okay, this is how I'm gonna justify this. And again, like it's not like a Mormon would do this stuff that we're talking about and not think that it's a sin. Like they know that they shouldn't. They know that this is wrong and it's bad, but in your head you're being like, well, it's not all the way bad. It's not the worst sin, you know? I'm making this better somehow in my brain.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Just like we were talking about, sex is a sin next to murder. It's like you don't want to have sex, but maybe we can get away with the lesser sins that are less time that you can't take the sacrament and less time that you can't go
Yeah.
to the temple and less repenting time.
I think the most common like loophole is probably either like hand jobs or having oral sex. Those are the ones that like, you know, within my Mormon group that I heard about happening the most and from the youngest ages. And the other stuff it kind of just progressed to.
Yeah. Or even just like naked cuddling. Like,
Yeah,
we're gonna cuddle without our clothes on, but that's it. Like, I'm not gonna touch you, but you're like clearly spooning me.
right. Or I have dry humping. I've also seen that called like zipper sparking,
Zipper
where
spray.
you're completely clothed, but like dry humping.
Oh yeah, that was my jam. That was my jam back in high school. For sure. We called it dry farming.
Dry farming.
Maybe that's a northern Utah thing.
I've heard Levi loving too.
Yeah, Levi Levin, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, I remember dry farming with other Mormon boys, like returned missionaries and stuff, and them actually ejaculating in their pants. And I'm like, oh, that was not intentional. But what do you do? Like when, and then you're sore, like your pubic bone hurts. Like it's not a good thing, but it feels good enough to where you're like, okay, I'm satisfied.
Exactly. It's worth it.
But we didn't realize what satisfied actually felt like. So to us, we were winning,
Right.
but we really weren't.
Right. Oh my gosh, it's so sad.
I know, and it's sad because I'm like grieving for my own past, like the things that I had to do or the things that I thought I needed to do to maintain a certain relationship with God, I guess you could say. Like, why are we bringing God into the bedroom? But that's a whole nother thing. I think what's most interesting about this is it creates this sort of adolescence, even through grown adults, where
Yeah.
we're doing the stuff that you do in high school, the stuff that you do. It's like a 15-year-old, like grinding on each other, hand jobs. I mean, a hand job can be great, don't get me wrong, but when you're limiting yourself to an adolescent form of sexuality, you carry over that mentality as a grown adult.
Right. I mean, it expresses itself in a lot of ways, and it's sad too because you think about like, you know, a lot of Mormons get married very young, partially because you want to finally just have sex. Like, it doesn't even matter who it's with at that point. Like, you just want to
Yeah.
get married so you can have sex. But some Mormons, they don't find the right person, and so you end up, you know, going a long, long time without ever having a real sexual experience. And like you said, there's a lot of immaturity with that. There's immaturity not only in, you know, not having had a sexual experience, but also like being repressed, having an immature sense of humor, because these things are like overly funny now because we've never been able to talk about it before. And
Yeah.
it's sad. It's really sad. I don't know if you ever, you know, had a like somebody in your ward or somebody that you knew that like never got married or, you know, had reached an older age and never had it gotten married. But I had a young women's leader who was, I think, in her like late 40s and had just never found the right person and had resigned herself to like, I'm just going to be single for my whole life and that is my calling in this life. And obviously, as a, you know, a very, you know, Orthodox Mormon, she was not going out of her way to have sex outside of marriage. She was just going to be a virgin for her whole life. And how sad is that?
That is really sad because sex can be so beautiful and so connecting. And I mean, there's a reason most people yell, oh my God, when they're having sex because it's a spiritual experience if you're doing it right, you know?
Yeah.
Let's talk about all of the other distortions that it causes. We know that Utah is one of the highest number of porn subscriptions, they watch the most porn, which is saying a lot because porn is a huge, huge sin. People get divorced. Mormons get divorced when they find out their partner has been watching porn because you're also not allowed to masturbate.
Right.
So that has split people up. And these are married couples.
Right. And again, I feel like this is something that most people, most Mormons are going to have some sort of experience with as, a younger person. And that's going to carry over when they get older as well. But it's interesting that, like what you're saying, that it has the highest number of porn subscriptions. It's something that, like, as a Mormon, you would not believe that's true, right? At least I wouldn't have. I would have been like, there's no way that's real. Somebody is just making that up because we don't do that. But, like, in the back of your head, like, yeah, I've definitely seen some porn.
For sure.
I don't know. It's wild.
Yeah, I remember the first time it was my sinful boyfriend in high school that got me to do something other than dry humping. He showed me this video of this dance. It was a couple. They were like super sensual and they were doing a dance that if they had their clothes off, it would be like sexual positions. And I remember getting so hot and bothered by that video. And I look back now and I'm like, this is a prime example of why repression just causes all of these other distortions, or it causes it to come out 10 times more intense than what it would be if you just like saw people having sex. Like, oh, that's porn. Like, people, right. Everything is amplified, and then they get locked into this loop. And imagine also, and I've been there actually as a Mormon, you watch porn, but then you're like, oh, I can't touch myself. And then it makes it even crazier. Like, you're having these intense feelings and you feel too guilty to relieve yourself. And then if you do, then it's like you feel like you're the scum of the earth after doing that.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely the kind of thing where it's like, if it did happen, like, you would try to not. And then if it did, immediately you are like, wow, I am the shittiest person in the entire world. Like, I deserve to die. I hate myself. Like, it was bad.
Right. And this is a healthy thing for humans to do. We have ultrasounds of literal infants in the womb touching themselves. Like, we know that it's a healthy thing for humans to do. And so, just like we were talking about earlier, they are setting you up for failure because it is not feasible. It is not healthy to restrain yourself in such a way that you're gonna mess up. And that's why, I forget her name, sex therapist.
You mean Natasha Helfer?
She was excommunicated because she spoke out about, no, masturbation is healthy. And she's like, either I tell the truth that masturbation is healthy and I speak out against the church, or I lose my license.
How sad. Genuinely, how sad is that?
Right. Because people are getting misinformed. Medical information.
And meanwhile, the church is teaching and has taught masturbation can make you gay. Like,
right.
But then they will also say things like, the so-called experts will tell you XYZ, but in reality, I know better because I speak for God, whatever bullshit comes out of their mouth.
I think that's also what drives me crazy is, what kind of God cares about what we do with our genitals? What kind of God creates humans to procreate and then gets pissed off when they do it, or when they have sex, when they act on these urges that are literally God-given? That's a little sadistic, don't you think?
It is. Because, like, I don't know, like, you think about, like, your family and the people that you love, like, what, I have kids. I can't imagine setting them up for failure like that. Like, that's really all it is. You have been set up for failure. You are not going to be able to manage this. It's not going to happen. But that's what you're expected to do.
Yeah, and you're going to be punished.
And for what purpose? What does it hurt somebody else if you touch your own body? Does that affect anybody else at all? No, of course not.
Exactly. And this just leads right into the whole, there's no education when it comes to sex. So masturbation is a beautiful way to get to know your own body. oh, I like this, I don't like this pressure feels good, this does not.
And that's going to be different for everybody too. So it's not like you can read that in a book.
Absolutely. How are you going to tell your partner when you are finally allowed to have sex what you like if you can't figure it out for yourself? And that also leads into your body is not for someone else's pleasure, because that's what they're telling you. That's the underlying message of no masturbating, is that you can only feel pleasure if it's on behalf of somebody else. No, that's not the case. So yeah, let's talk about all of the different ways that Mormons or people in high demand religions are not educated about sex.
In basically every way, I feel like
Every way.
yeah, like even like we were talking about earlier with the church, like laying out these guidelines and being no necking and no heavy petting, which they never tell you what that actually means. I don't think anybody ever explained to me what masturbation was. Like, I had no idea. Like, I had to figure that out by myself using context clues, because nobody ever said that's what this is. So, but by the time I knew what masturbation meant, what it was, I had already done it without knowing what it was.
Same.
So, like, that, if that doesn't say like the amount of education that we have on the subject, I don't know what does.
I think I was a senior in high school when it actually accidentally went off, right? When I was like, what was that? I don't think I even realized that women could masturbate, because everything is centered around men.
Yeah.
Which is another issue. The way that they set it up, it's like men are the sexual ones and women don't have a sex drive. And so then women are like, oh, I'm clearly not supposed to be feeling this way. It's the men that need to control themselves.
Yeah, is there something wrong with me once you start feeling horny?
Right. What are these feelings? I was probably in high school when I found out what a clitoris was. Like, I didn't even know that we had a pleasure point.
Yeah, me neither.
When you don't even know your basic anatomy, some people go into marriage not even realizing, like, where do I put the penis? Like, what does it even look like down there? Like, you're not even supposed to look at yourself, because, like, if I look at it, I don't know, maybe I'm gonna get horny or something. Like, they don't even encourage basic bodily
exploration.
They don't encourage you to understand your anatomy.
Right. Which is just sad. I mean, and I feel like it's such a disservice, especially when you're not only, you know, not educating about any of that, but you also have all of this shame wrapped up around not just sex, but your body in general. Like within the Mormon church, modesty is such a huge deal. So, you know, women, from the time you're a child, you're not supposed to show your shoulders or your legs or your back or your chest or your stomach. And it's like, I mean, like, where do you go from here? You have so like little understanding of yourself, of other people, of your body, of like, I mean, it's just sad. The shame and the guilt and the complex you give yourself and that the church has taught you. Sorry, it just makes me upset, because there are people who will sit and act like Mormonism isn't that bad. You don't have religious trauma. And it's like, are you joking? Like, it's bad. It is really bad. We do have it bad. There is so much work to be done after leaving the church, figuring out how real life works, figuring out sex, figuring out yourself. It boggles my mind that people will act like this is not a big deal.
I agree. And it's one of those things where they don't realize how controlled they are until they have a different perspective. Because I remember thinking that too. And also people will say, it's not a restrictive religion. It's just giving me guidelines so that I don't have to feel pain. It's like I go through the pain so that I can avoid pain. And that doesn't even make sense either.
No,
like God is telling me the rules so I can avoid the pain in the afterlife. And I'm thinking, no, God doesn't want you to be in pain. It doesn't make any sense. And with the education thing, women don't even understand their cycles. So I've been an egg donor 5 times.
Wow.
I didn't know about my cycle until I was sitting in an office with a female nurse and a gynecologist being like, so this is how you ovulate. This is when you're fertile. This is when this hormone happens. And I'm like, the female body is amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, why am I finding out about how my body works when I think I was like 22 years old? How did I not know that you can't get pregnant certain times of the month? That would have been
Right.
really useful when you're trying to avoid pregnancy, because this whole abstinence only thing is not effective. When that's the only tool in the toolkit that you're giving these kids is don't have sex and you won't get STDs and you won't get pregnant, that's not feasible because it's going to happen. And that's why there's so many teen pregnancies in Utah. I think we had like 4 girls one year in our school of 300 that were pregnant.
Wow.
And it's like, I went to Portland and no teen pregnancies. People were on birth control because their parents were like, yeah, you're going to have sex. And when you want to have sex, let me know and I'll give you the pill.
Right.
That is a healthy approach to the whole sex thing, not
Right.
just don't do it. And if you do it, I'm going to shame you and you're going to have to repent and you're probably going to get an STD and die. Don't do that.
Right.
Because again, they're setting us up for failure. If they would just explain to us how the female cycle works, if they would explain to us how STDs are transmitted and contracted, there would just education.
Yeah.
Education.
I mean, and there's like you said, like there's such better ways to handle it. And the thing that I've noticed, with more, as society progresses, some Mormons have become more progressive as well. And so you will see a huge difference. And it's specifically like Utah Mormons. I mean, Utah can be absolutely wild, right? And a lot of times out of state Mormons are a little bit more normal, like for lack of a better word, they're more normal.
Yeah.
So I've seen Mormons, outside of Utah that have like realized like, yeah, like my kid is sexually active or they want to be sexually active and gone out and, bought condoms for their kid because that is so much better than dealing with a teen pregnancy. And I feel like it's something that at some point the church is going to have to start changing because there are just so many issues with a abstinence only education, if you can call it that. And one of those too ends up being that we know absolutely nothing about consent. And where does that lead?
Exactly. I'm so glad you brought that up because this is huge. So another thing that happens within Mormonism is that women are taught, the priesthood holders, you do what they say. Like they have the power of God. You don't. You're there to serve them, basically.
Yeah.
Which also leads into sex. So when a husband says to his wife, I want to have sex, she is expected to comply. And never once have we ever been taught that that's not the case. Like you don't have to have sex if you don't want to. And it just leaves open so much room for abusive relationships where women think, well, I'm married, so I have to give him sex whenever he wants. And that's not the case. Like there can still be boundaries within marriage, within relationships. But not only that, explaining to these young girls who will come across boys who try to have sex with them, and if they're stuck on the abstinence only like I was, not realizing when they're pushing boundaries too much, not realizing that I can have boundaries and that I can say no, and giving me the words to be able to say, no, I don't want to do just the tip because I know that that's probably going to lead to sex and I want to be a virgin till marriage. Even just giving them that verbiage to help them understand that you have a choice.
Right.
And you can say no, and this is how you do it.
Yeah. I thought it was great too that you brought up like the boundaries within marriage too. And also the fact that like, I don't know if you ever felt this way, but I definitely did, like as a young person and, having relationships, being with guys and, not even having sex, but, having these other sexual encounters where I would feel like pressured into doing things that I didn't want to do because the guy would act like, well, if you don't give me this, I'm going to have to go look for it somewhere else. And then it suddenly became my problem that, he is interested in doing X, Y, Z, and that would be my fault. And like, that's messed up too. But I had no, like, I hadn't been educated about it. I didn't know what to even do in that situation other than give him what he was looking for because I didn't want him to go looking somewhere else.
Yeah, I have a story that is exactly that, actually. So going back to my sexually repressive relationship at 19, I get sat down one day and he said, I have something to tell you. I had sex with someone else. I lost my mind. First of all, like, I don't know if you've ever been cheated on. It is the worst feeling on the planet. It's just like I'm worthless. They don't love me. Like, of course, things that probably aren't true, but you go down this spiral. And then he said, well, there were two women. And I'm like, what? There's two? Which, oh my gosh, I almost forgot like the worst part of the story. Back up. He starts this conversation by reading me a book. And I've looked for this book. I can't find it. I don't remember the name of it. So if you know the name of this, listeners, please put it in the comments. It was this book, and I think it was like a religious context about how when we come to Earth, some people choose to be oppressors and some people choose to be victims. And if we didn't have the oppressors, we would never get the chance to learn to forgive. He literally started our conversation.
He had it all planned out, didn't he?
He had it planned out, and we get to the end, and he's like, so what do you think? And I was like, I don't know. I think it's kind of a cop-out.
Yeah.
Basically victim blaming, like, well, you chose this. I don't really agree with that. And then he didn't really have a choice because he already decided he was going to tell me that night, well, I cheated on you. And I'm like, is that why you read me that ridiculous book? To try and get me on the side of, thank you for doing that, because now, because you've cheated on me, I can learn to forgive you. I was livid. And here's the kicker, though. This is where I'm going with this whole story. He says to me, well, I didn't want to corrupt you because I was a virgin. I didn't want to take your virtue. So I just went to someone else. Like, isn't that the better option?
Wow.
He goes, don't worry. Don't worry, they were just sluts. They didn't mean anything. Like, we just had sex and they wanted me to stay and cuddle, but I didn't. I just left. I'm like, wow, that's so nice of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
He's over here
Thank
like,
you for
you're
sparing
welcome.
me. And we had been dating for a year, and I was like, don't you think I would have rather you took my virtue than go have sex with two random, quote, sluts that you clearly just used, and now I'm feeling bad for these women.
Yeah.
That's not okay.
So messed up. This actually reminded me, and I don't want to go into like details of the situation just because there's too much, but there was a situation where I had a talking to from a priesthood holder basically telling me that like if my husband like looked at porn or did anything like that or like sought, you know, sex or elsewhere or anything like similar to that, it would be my fault because men are visual creatures. And if I wasn't giving enough of myself and showing enough of myself, that basically that would be my fault because men are quote unquote visual creatures.
Oh my gosh. I can't, like, this is exactly what I was talking about. How, geez, I didn't even realize that they literally said that to women. I thought it was just implied. But to get the confirmation that they are telling you it's your responsibility to satiate your husband.
Yep, 100%. And if he basically, like, and within Mormonism, like we talked about, like, there is no relationship in which pornography is okay. But it's not a thing in Mormonism. So you're basically being told that, like, your husband cheating on you is your fault. It would be your fault if this happened, if you are not giving him enough of what he needs, pleasuring him enough, any of this stuff. It's messed up.
This is so infuriating. And here's the other thing. Again, they're setting these women up for failure, and men too. This is a universal thing. When you grow up thinking that sin or that sex is a sin next to murder, and that being in your body is shameful, and that your shoulders are bad, and you create this body dysmorphia, like, oh, sex feelings, those are bad. I need to shut that off. Like a light switch, right? Book of Mormon musical. Then when you get married and you're expected to flip it on again, how do they expect you to do that? Because you have associated these sexual feelings with being wrong, with being ashamed, with repenting, and now you're just supposed to enjoy it. And so, of
Right.
course, there's going to be issues within having sex with your partner because not only do you not know how to do it, not only have you probably used porn as your educational source, which is not a good thing to do. Like, watch porn if you want to, but that's not real,
Right.
accurate representations of what
Right.
sex is.
Not even close.
Not only that, you don't know what foreplay is because no one shows that in movies or porn. So you don't even know how to get aroused to the point of being able to accept a penis. There's so many things that are working against you that, of course, like, you're not going to have a shot.
Right. And like we talked about with, you know, your body dysmorphia and stuff, in the Mormon church, like we said, immodesty is really, really looked down upon. But not only that, some of the like older prophets and apostles said things that shamed women into being modest. So like your women who show their, there was like a For the Strength of Youth, a couple, you know, probably like 3 or 4 versions back that said if you're showing off your back in a backless dress or something like that, either your shoulder blades are too bony and that's gross, or you look bulky and that's gross. So it's like no matter what you do, like you're either too fat or too skinny, you're going to be ugly in a backless dress. Or you have bony knees. We don't want to see your knees. It's just like it's all about shaming women into it. And it wasn't, you know, and in the modern day, they will like to act like, oh, this is just about us having respect for our bodies. But that's not how it was. They were coming at it from, you are ugly under your clothes. You need to cover that up. So how do you go from, I'm ugly under my clothes, to, I need to strip down naked and let somebody else look at me?
Yep.
And then I'm supposed to be comfortable enough in that situation to be aroused. Are you joking? There is no way. There is no way.
And there's so many contradictions because on one hand, you're too ugly and how dare you show your bony knees. I vaguely remember the quote. I think I covered it in one of my episodes of True Mormon Quotes, where it was like, who are you to think that your bony knees and shoulders are attractive? And then on the other hand, if you show your shoulders and if you show your knees, then you are going to tempt a man.
You're walking pornography. Yeah.
Which is it? Walking pornography. My porn shoulders. I always say that to my fiance. I'm like, I got my porn shoulders out today. And he's like, ooh.
Whatever they can do to shame women. That's really all it is. It's whatever it takes to achieve the desired effect. So if we have to say things that are contradictory, we'll do that. What works on you? That you are walking pornography? Does that work on you? Or do I need to tell you that you're ugly? Then will that work? Will you cover yourself up at that point? I mean, it's just whatever it takes to manipulate and shame women. That's all it is.
And that just got me thinking, like, what is their end goal? Because aren't they trying to get us to have as many children as possible to bring up the children of Zion? Like, that isn't accomplished by disconnecting women from their bodies. I think that's a huge thing, is women become so disconnected from their body that they can't even tune in and know what feels good.
Right.
Or they block themselves from feeling pleasure. They block themselves from actually getting aroused to the point where sex is painful. And they don't even know that sex isn't supposed to be painful because no one's told them about it. No one's told them how to have a loving, healthy, consensual sexual relationship with another human being, which can be so beautiful.
Yeah.
And can elevate your marriage to the next level. But without the education, and then you add on the shame and the guilt, it's so hard to get there. And it takes couples sometimes 10 years to get to the point where they're actually like enjoying sex.
Right.
I mean, even just when was it, in the 80s? And I found out this later, that they were telling people who were married not to have oral sex because it was a sin. And if you have oral sex, you should tell your bishop. And I'm like, guys, get out of the bedroom. Like, this is not your jurisdiction. So not your business. Especially when you're married. And
at that point, like, you're having more communication with your bishop about what you're doing than you are with your partner. So like, you're not setting healthy boundaries. You're not figuring out like what you're comfortable with. Like, because there's certain things that like certain people are and are not comfortable with, and that's fine. You know, some people are monogamous and some are not. And some people, you know, want to watch porn and have sex and do what people on the screen are doing, and some people don't. But you don't have these conversations because you don't talk about it, because it's a sin and you are used to that being a sin. So you, like you're talking about, they said, oh, like you shouldn't have oral sex, you need to talk to your bishop about that. You go talk to the bishop, you're probably telling the bishop more than you've ever talked about with your partner, because that's, you know, the mediator, which, like, why would that be the case? Why is he involved, especially between two married people? This is what you wanted, right? The church wants you to get married and have kids. Why is the bishop involved in any of these decisions at all? Oh,
I agree.
So sad.
And he's not licensed to talk about these things.
He's just some guy. He's the guy down the street. Like, it's the guy.
He's your friendly neighbor.
No.
He doesn't know how to handle these situations. He doesn't know how to coach a woman into being able to feel pleasure, because it's not just a physical thing. It's not like, well, have your guy do this before sex. No, it's a lot of it is mental,
right?
Especially for women. We are very emotional, mental creatures when it comes to sex. If we're not turned on, it's like, sorry, my body's not doing the thing. Like,
right. Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you. So people need actual help, licensed psychologists and therapists like Natasha Helford who know the information and know how to help you. So yeah, I love that you brought up communication, and I never thought of it that way, that yeah, the bishop knows more about your sex life than your actual husband, because you're forced to tell him these personal, intimate details.
Well, and the church has encouraged that. So it's not like I was just saying, like, oh, like, go around talking to your bishop. That's what you're supposed to do. You're having issues, you go talk to your bishop. You receive counsel from your bishop. And again, that is just some guy. He is a guy that lives 5 doors down and works as a Walmart greeter. Like, he is just some guy. Like, it doesn't have to be anybody in particular. It's just whoever the Lord chose. And to be perfectly honest with you, that doesn't always work out. One of my bishops was a sexual predator who is now in prison. And he was the one that everybody was telling all of their issues to. So it's just some guy. He has no credentials. He has no qualifications. He has no license. And all the while, he was a predator. So you're not getting help, right? You are not receiving any sort of real help with this. You're just talking to a person who could be anybody.
Yeah, it's dangerous. And they tell you that these people are called of God, so you trust them.
You do. And that's what causes a lot of the problems. I feel like that is what a lot of this comes from, is you take somebody who, you know, on their own maybe isn't a good person. And then you put them in a position of power over children. What's going to happen?
Yeah, I remember for people that are like, no, we're not supposed to talk about our marital issues with the bishop. The reason I found out my parents were having, or my dad had an affair on my mom, was because I went into the bishop. They set up an appointment for me to go and talk to the bishop, and he's the one who told me what was going on.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm like, why am I here? Like, and I had to have this uncomfortable conversation. He goes, and luckily he was a really cool guy. Like, I got really lucky with this bishop, and he was like, so Shelise, do you know what's going on? And I'm like, an affair? Like, I don't even know what the word meant. I was like, I think my dad had sex with someone else. And he was like, that's right. And your dad's doing everything he can to become a member in good standing again. And I'm just like, this is so weird. Like,
why am I talking to you about this? Oh God.
I should be having this conversation with my parents.
Yeah. And a family therapist. Like, oh.
Seriously.
That's
I mean,
horrifying.
To my mom's credit, she tried to get me to go to a therapist afterwards, and I was like mortified of going to a therapist. I think I went once and I hated every minute of it. She did try, but it just shows you that that's what we're taught, is you take your problems to the bishop, and these people who are not qualified can probably make it worse or not help at all. And also breeds the perfect opportunity for sex abuse to go unreported to the law. They're in a huge lawsuit right now, the churches. I'm sure you know that, of these sexual abuse cases that were not reported to authorities because the bishop said, no, I'll handle it, don't report it. Meanwhile, this poor little girl continues to get abused because the bishop doesn't say anything. And that breaks my heart. I want things to change, and I know you do too. And I'm not trying to like, let's take down the Mormon church. I want them to fix what they're doing so that if people choose to believe that way, they can have a better shot at having a better life without the guilt, the shame, the perpetrators, without the abuse. That's all I want.
Right. And I mean, that's exactly, you could not have said it better. Like, it really comes down to wanting other people to have a better experience than we did. I mean, it was not easy. It's been very difficult. And on the other side of it, it's been very traumatic. Of course, we don't want people to go through that. I mean, most of the people that I love and cherish are members of the church. I not over here like burn the church to the ground. It's I want you to be happy and healthy. And there's changes. There's actual real changes that can be made to make that happen. It's totally plausible if the church would implement them.
Yes, 100%. It's not something that it's like, well, I guess that's just how it is. No, things can change, and usually it takes the Exmo Lexes and the John DeLynns to speak out about something, then magically the doctrine changes, and you're like, oh, that's convenient. Interesting.
Wow.
I just did a whole episode on that. Wonder why they were suddenly inspired to make a change after they excommunicate the people that speak out about it.
Yeah. Oh, God.
This leads into my Linda Listen moment. Is there something that you want to say, either a spicy, I need to get this off my chest to an organization person, or something that you want to say that is inspirational to our viewers who may have gone through something similar, and your advice?
Let's see. Listen, Linda, sex can be such a beautiful, magical, spiritual experience if you are educated, if you are smart about it, if you have communication and consent, and your religion, your God, your bishop is not involved.
Amen. I will attend the Church of Exmo Lex any Sunday of the week. Well, this conversation has been amazing. I'm like so pumped. Just, you just get amped about this stuff and you just want to tell the world everything and just listen, So thank you so much for coming on and having this amazing conversation. I think it's going to help a lot of people. I'm excited for people to see it. Before we plug all of your channels, is there anything else that you want to add?
You know what? Go out there and have lots of sex. Go to a sex shop and look at everything they have and buy a bunch of it and have a great time.
Yes, I'm for that 100%. Buy a vibrator, all the toys, like vibrators are your friend. Amazing. So tell everyone how they can find you, connect with you, watch your content.
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I kind of have all of the different things. All of my handles are Exmo Lex, @Exmo Lex. Go to my YouTube channel. All of it will be linked there, Exmo Lex. And if you want to see more content, if you want to see me be a little bit spicy sometimes, a little bit angry sometimes, a little bit sad sometimes, you get a little bit of everything.
I love it so much. I love that you're authentic with your viewers. You tell it how it is, and you present it in a way that I think is digestible to where people. I mean, I've seen the comments on your things like, oh, she's the reason that I left because she planted a seed, or like she got me so mad about something that she said that I went and researched it and realized she was right. Like, that's the stuff that we need. So thank you for what you're doing. It's amazing, and I hope you continue to do that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Of course. So thank you for watching, everyone. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well. Thanks for listening. If you like what you hear, it would mean a lot if you could like and subscribe on YouTube and leave a review or a comment to help with our visibility. You can also find me on social media at Cults2Consciousness or reach out by email at cults2consciousness@gmail.com.